Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 346, Leaky Gut and SIBO with James and Dahlia Marin.
In this episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talk with James and Dahlia Marin about all things gut health, from the mouth to the anus, as they describe it. It's interesting to hear how they came to a plant-based lifestyle and what changed in their lives and their health. We also, of course, got into what leaky gut is, what are those symptoms to look for, and what to do about it if you have it. And the same for SIBO. A lot of people have not heard of SIBO. It is Small Intestinal Bacterial Overgrowth. And so we talk about that, but we also talk about Candida because it seems to go together when you think about it. I think that you're going to find it really interesting to hear James's take on some of the environmental factors that really play into our overall gut health. And then, of course, how that gut health affects you from head to toe.
James is a holistic registered dietitian, and Dahlia is a plant-based registered dietitian nutritionist. They're both the co-founders of Married to Health, Your Gut Connection, and the Institute of Plant-Based Medicine. James specializes in using whole plant foods as a form of medical nutrition therapy. He's used his knowledge of food and the environment to help hundreds of his patients prevent and reverse diseases like gastritis, colitis, Crohn's disease, and so many more. His approach takes into account transgenerational factors, stress, nutrition habits, environment, and work-life balance to come up with a tailored approach for each of his patients. Dahlia has used food as medicine on a whole food, plant-based diet for the past 8 years to overcome prediabetes, PCOS, GI issues, obesity, and Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. She also had a healthy plant-based pregnancy. She's passionate about healing the gut as it is key to healing the entire body. She uses her own health story and clinical experience working with clients of a multitude of backgrounds and health conditions to get to the root of what ails them, helping to find true healing and well-being.
We really do urge you to share this with all your friends, but especially those who are dealing with gut and IBS issues. And if they don't know what's wrong with them, this might be a really powerful episode for them as well.
We want to thank everyone for their support with the Yummy Foods activity book for kids that we recently published and is now available on Amazon and Kindle. We know it's being used in homeschooling programs as community outreach materials, as well as a way to keep kids busy, learning, and having fun without electronics. We wanted to share a few testimonials happy customers have left, and this one's from Jessica.
I love learning about new foods. Still being a fairly new vegan family, I would love for them to learn even more. I was pleasantly surprised when we received the workbooks and every one of my children, ages 1, 3, 8, 10, 12, and 16 took interest. Wow. Well done, Shoshana and Adam. This book is interesting, fun, informative, and I feel good about the fact that my kids are not only wanting to play with it, but they are learning at the same time. Win-win.
To get yourself or a young one a copy, visit the link in our show notes, which is planttrainers.com/yummyfoods, or search Yummy Foods on your country's Amazon site. And now for a moment of gratitude.
I'm grateful that the family came out to watch me play catchball the other night. I talk about it all the time, and Adam's making a face, and I think I may have stolen his moment of gratitude. I talk about it all the time, but now that they have seen it and kind of know how the game works, I feel like it kind of connected us a little bit closer.
Yeah, it was fun to watch you play, but you didn't steal my moment of gratitude. I'm grateful for, on the weekend, we got together with our family for dinner, and I'm just grateful for every time we have that opportunity to get together as a family to have a nice meal.
Dahlia and James Marin, thank you so much for joining us on the Plant Trainers Podcast today.
Thank you for having us. We're excited.
We're excited too. Another married couple. It's so much fun. We were kind of, talking about marital stuff before we got on. Do you have a moment of gratitude besides being married that you'd like to share with us and the listeners?
Yeah, I love that we get this opportunity to share. But had it not been for others who had imparted their knowledge, wisdom, passion on us beforehand, I don't think we would have been afforded this opportunity to really break these transgenerational habits that are learned, such as diet and culture or mindset. And so I'm just really grateful for others sharing their knowledge so we can break patterns, grow, learn, and help others do so as well.
And then I would say I'm grateful for this technology and using this technology in a positive way, because it's so easy to use technology, or it gets the rap of like, oh, you're wasting time and it's bad for you, but it can be so amazing where we made amazing connections. And yeah, grateful for that.
Yeah, that's a good one. We love this platform of podcasts. You know, some people do watch on YouTube to see it live, but, you know, just the audio, because you can make better use of your time. So when you are exercising, when you're commuting, when you're walking, when you're cleaning the kitchen, you can actually do more with your time. That's not a negative type of multitasking, but you can learn. And if you're doing action, I mean, research is showing that when you exercise or using your body while you're listening to these kind of things, it actually gets in deeper and roots deeper, and you might even start doing things or remembering things that you wouldn't have otherwise had you just been sitting still.
And you mentioned before that imparting all the knowledge from the people before us, and one thing that brings what you both just said, the technology and the knowledge together, is that through this podcast and through the technology, we've been able to connect with people who we only read about at one point or read their books. And now we're actually, because the world is shrinking, we're able to have face-to-face contact with them, communication, and talk to them. And it's so cool where we've come to and how we have the opportunity to continue to share more and more knowledge like we're going to do today. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, we love it.
So talking about the ones who came before us, how did plant-based fall on your plate? Nice pun.
Yeah. No, and that's a good, no pun intended. But no, we were talking about this because we had to think back of like, wow. And it's been quite a journey for us, probably like 10-year journey. And I think, Dahlia, you started reading the Omnivores Dilemma.
Yeah. So on other podcasts and talks we've done, we've always said, oh yeah, James read the China study and when we were in college studying dietetics. And then I was like, you know what? Last night I was thinking, how did you read that book? Where did you buy it? Did you go to a bookstore to buy it? Did you buy it on Amazon? How did you even get there to buy the China study? So we sat there and thought back to almost 11 years ago and realized that I think the progression happened. We realized that in about 2010, James was researching more into organics. So we were kind of woke at that point to organic and eating organic, learning about that.
We're very aware of genetically modified organisms, and I was diving into a lot of the research on that and listening to different talks. And then at the same time...
And then I was taking a food ethics class or a food policy class, and we had to choose one book to do a project on. So I chose Michael Pollan's The Omnivores Dilemma, which dives deep into the food system. And, you know, at one point in the book, he spends time with a chicken farmer and talks about the entire process of chicken farming. And that made me want to rewatch Food Inc. So Food Inc. came out, I think, in 2008. And at this point, it was 2011. And then we had our eyes just reopened with this refreshment of information on the food system. And then I think from there, maybe Netflix suggested that we watch Earthlings or something.
Yeah.
And from
That's
there,
a whole other step.
It was just watching, reading. And then by 2011, we were vegan. So we were like,
I think the end
done.
of 2011, yeah.
But it was a progression for us. We cut out red meat, we cut out chicken, then we cut out eggs. Then I know for me the last thing was cheese. I was highly addicted to cheese, especially being a Hispanic, and just I had put cheese on everything my whole life. So that was a little challenging, but totally never looking back. Don't miss it whatsoever. So we've been a total of 9 years vegan, and then I'd probably say 4 or 5 years whole food plant-based. So never looking back. We feel amazing.
So cool because we remember, he read the China study, and then we went to one of Dr. Greger's talks at this Seventh-day Adventist church. And that was really when we were like, okay, we're doing it. And that's when we were like, we're going to cut out the cheese. And just recently we got an opportunity to go back and speak at that church. So it was very surreal and kind of this nice little circle of life that we experienced.
Yeah.
So it's been a journey.
Yeah. It's been fun.
You listed so many amazing books that people can then go ahead and read if they haven't already. And, we haven't heard some of those come up in a while. So, Michael Pollan's book hasn't come up in a while. So it's great to have that refresher of, where to go when you want to share things with other people or kind of just learn a little bit more for yourself. Did you find that you had any, you were already dietitians, already looking into a healthy lifestyle. Did you have any health changes or mental health changes? What changed in your life when you went plant-based?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll start because I'm shorter list than Dahlia, but I was like a bodybuilder type, but I was always sick. Like almost once a month I had a cold or allergies or the flu. And even before that, I was a morbidly obese child. I had chronic joint pain, asthma. And so this progression of just getting healthy was really great for me. And that was kind of what kind of shed off of myself and how I felt amazing. Just still had my strength, still had my energy, but without getting sick all the time. It was like I was chronically inflamed. Mm-hmm. That was a little more.
And I've had more of an intricate, complicated health story. Mm-hmm. And so probably 3-4 years prior to going vegan, I was simultaneously in one day diagnosed as an obese child with polycystic ovarian syndrome, prediabetes. I was diagnosed with high cholesterol and an autoimmune thyroid condition, and I was given 2 or 3 prescriptions and was told, okay, take these, be on your way. And I did. I was a good patient. I went home. I did it for a month or so. And then I realized I felt terrible before, and somehow I feel worse. And I realized I'm not doing this. There has to be another way. So I was also kind of on my progression by the time that we met and we started college. And going more vegan, and even now going whole food plant-based, has reversed completely my prediabetes. I even had a completely healthy pregnancy with no gestational diabetes. And they were really worried about that because I had a history of having, prediabetes. I, of course, reversed my high cholesterol, my polycystic ovarian syndrome. I remember I had a doctor tell me, are you sure you were diagnosed with this in the past? Because there's technically no cure for it, but I can't detect it in your body. Mm-hmm. So that reversed. And then my autoimmune condition was so much more controlled than it ever was prior in my life. So I always had these flares. I would feel these terrible flares of my autoimmune condition. I was on an extremely high dosage of medication, and now I take about 10% the amount of medication for my thyroid than I ever did. And, it's autoimmune, so my immune system has damaged my thyroid, but it's really, I think, improved significantly with going whole food plant-based.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of these results are very common for people that have transitioned to this type of lifestyle. Why is that, and why are more people not doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it goes back to just our allopathic care model. I mean, we have doctor friends who are like, wow, I never really thought about inflammation. I
thought it was a joke. I had a doctor friend tell me that yesterday. I thought it was all quackery before. When patients would say inflammation, I would be like, oh, you're crazy.
Because it's so ingrained in them to not connect. And it's so ingrained to compartmentalize, right? So it's like, okay, heart disease is this, diabetes is this, cancer is this. Oh, you have gut issues? That's down here. Don't worry. They don't intertwine. They don't connect.
And there's a pill for every ill.
Right. So you have to take a pill for this, a pill for that. Yeah. And it's just not connected.
Even as dietitians, we were taught in school this very compartmentalized medical nutrition therapy. So, I don't blame doctors. I don't blame dietitians. I don't blame any one person. I think it's just this consortium of factors that has created the system where we as caregivers don't even have the information. So how would we impart that on our patients?
And I do have to say, if there is someone to blame, it is those profiting, because it's not by happen chance of like, oops, we just have this system that teaches doctors this way and teaches dietitians and nurses this way. It's been a progression of lobbyists and very fine-tuned influences for sure. But it's up to us, and especially again going back to this age of technology. Any doctor, any dietitian, any nurse, any whoever, even if they're a naturopathic doctor, can look at the research, can go online and find this information.
Read these great books, and yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and we're talking to people on a regular basis who are making a difference in medical schools and getting nutritional information, the proper nutritional information. So it's happening. It's definitely happening. And it's platforms like this that are allowing more and more reach and more depth for people. Now, you mentioned gut health, and you guys are gut health experts. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding, or just people haven't really had a full experience with some of the terminology out there. And we kind of wanted to talk about some of the gut health issues that are out there today, and how a plant-based diet and how the environment, or your environment around you, can affect them. So what is it about leaky gut? I think if somebody who hasn't researched or thought about leaky gut, if they just think about, what those words mean, let our listeners know, is that exactly what it is? Is the gut literally leaking and it's diaper time? Like, what is it? Let people understand it.
Well, I want to say first and foremost, so part of this change, so we're part of an integrative practice with Dr. Angie Sadeghi. We're in Newport Beach, California, and we're actually, so a sneak peek is we're rebranding to the Institute of Plant-Based Medicine. We're gonna bring on more plant-based providers. So we are kind of changing this. We're really excited for 2020. We're going to be announcing more of that. But speaking to leaky gut, I'll let Dahlia go first.
Yeah, so with leaky gut, that phrase is becoming popular. I would say most households can repeat that phrase, but it's not a lot of people who understand truly what it is. And so, with proper medical terminology, we call it intestinal permeability. And when we say gut, I think most people assume stomach, right? So they assume, stomach, and we even have these terms like, I have a cast iron gut, or I have this really strong gut. People don't realize that your gut, one, is not just your stomach, and I'll explain what all that it is, but two, it's not that strong. It's made of tissue, right? It's made of skin, and so it can easily become damaged. And when we say gut, it's everything mouth to anus. It's actually this one big long tube that's connected. And so it's kind of compartmentalized, so different parts can do their different jobs, but it is all connected. So you eat food, it goes down your esophagus, and this little door opens, and it allows that food to pass into your stomach. And that's where acid kind of breaks it apart and prepares it for digestion. And then after you've broken it up in the stomach, it passes then through another little door to the small intestine. And in the small intestine, we're really absorbing a lot of nutrients. And then you have your last stop, the large intestine. That's that last little door that opens. In the large intestine, you have 70% of your gut bacteria, and that's going to try to ferment the rest of that food, or, really break it down and absorb the very last amounts that it can. Whatever doesn't get absorbed, we package it up, it leaves. And so that is all a very complex system, I would say. But if you're putting a substrate into that system that's irritating it, think of kind of something scratching at it. So you have your gut, it's made of what's called tight junctions. So it quite literally looks like these fingers that hold one another. And then they're tightly holding each other. So you have these tight junctions in your intestinal tube. And then you have this protective mucus layer. So that ensures that your stomach acid doesn't eat through your stomach, or that ensures that the food stays in the tube. It should not get out of the tube. Once things are out of the tube, they're in your bloodstream. That's no good. So when you're eating foods or exposing yourself to things that are causing inflammation, generating inflammation, I always say, think of it as something irritating, scratching, or a little fire, right? First, you rip off your protective layer. So you've lost that mucousy layer in various parts of your GI tract. And then you start to kind of scratch at or irritate your hands. And so that will then go on and create these micropermeabilities, these small holes. So again, once that happens, your tube is not an enclosed system anymore. Food gets out into your bloodstream, and that triggers the immune system. And you can have various symptoms once that's happening.
And to kind of add to that, so like Dahlia mentioned, these are modified skin cells. So they're a single layer thin. This gut isn't this impenetrable fortress. We're talking about a single cell layer. And if you're thinking of someone who designed something, or an architect, You're talking about this system where you're taking the outside world and shoving it in your mouth and chewing it up and putting it inside of you. Why would you only want it to be a single cell layer thin? And that is because the idea is not that we should be away from nature or separate from nature. We should bring nature into us every day. We should be connected to the earth, to the soil, to the oxygen, to the water. And unfortunately, it's just adulterated a lot of the times, right? We're getting a lot of these irritants and pollutants in. Another kind of idea with this is, you are degrading this mucosal layer, which is carbohydrates. So these gut microbes, and when we say microbes, we're talking about bacteria, fungi, archaea. What did I miss? Protozoa. So we're missing all these different guys that like to eat carbohydrates. And then when you lack carbohydrates, they eat away at this mucosal layer, and it speeds this process along. Another way to look at it, I just like to give this analogy really quick, is you go to the doctor and it's like you've been hitting your hand, right? You just keep hitting your hand and hitting your hand. And pretty soon it gets all bruised and bloody. It's going to get infected, and you keep hitting your hand. And you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, we just have to amputate your hand. And that's the same way as if you keep damaging your gut. And the doctor eventually says, well, we have to resect your colon. Or we have to cut out a piece of your stomach, or cut out a piece of your small intestine. Why don't we just stop hitting our hand? Why doesn't the doctor say, hey, you keep hitting and damaging your hand, let's stop that action, then your hand will heal. The skin and all the parts of this was meant to heal if you just stop hitting it and hitting it and hitting it. Unfortunately, because we just don't see it on the outside, it's on the inside, we just lose that kind of common sense. And it's kind of baffling. But.
And we often hear from even patients tell us their other old gastroenterologists before they found us will tell them food has nothing to do with your symptoms, or leaky gut, intestinal permeability, that's not a real thing. So it's still not widely accepted, I would say.
Right.
So before we get into the what is causing this, what are the outcomes from having this leaky gut? It sounds like you're not going to be having all of the food and nutrients go into the small intestine properly and be absorbed into the body. So then you become deficient in certain minerals or vitamins or what have you. And then there's an effect on your hair and your skin and your mental health and all of that. But then what's also some of the bad things that can happen by all of that going through the intestine into the body, and what happens in the body there?
So I think we should speak from our patient experience and just almost like case studies where we've had patients who are bedridden, migraines, they have that vertigo, dizziness, they have skin disorders. So whether it's eczema, psoriasis,
dermatitis,
extreme allergies, so that postnasal drip, everything is just irritating their eyes and their nose and the back of their throat. And so, I mean, you name it, it's a whole gamut.
Brain fog, fatigue, joint pain, because your immune system, again, it's trying to attack these food proteins that are live in your bloodstream now, and it's kind of just attacking elsewhere as kind of a crossfire.
And you really lose the mechanisms, right? So histamines are a vital part of your immune system. They're also a vital part of food and almost everything in the environment. So when you're breaking down these mechanisms, like your mucosal barrier and of course your tight junctions, and you're destroying some of these microbes, you're losing that ability to properly process these histamines. And that's where you hear the term antihistamine, right? Like a Sudafed or something like that. So imagine your body just can't handle histamines. It just triggers this insane immune response. And there's really no amount of antihistamine you can take, although the doctors will try to just give you tons of antihistamines or histamine blockers. But I mean, at one point, it's like you have to repair your gut in order to repair this process, because it's just like a wildfire, just out of control. Yeah.
So from a doctor's point of view who's not very versed in this, or even just anybody off the street, it sounds like the symptoms that you're describing wouldn't necessarily say, oh, I have leaky gut, because they're not really gut related. So how does somebody think, maybe I have leaky gut, and how do they get tested for that?
Yeah, so So typically, I mean, this is why we fell in love with the gut, because everything begins in the gut. So if you have any of those symptoms we mentioned, then you most likely have some sort of leaky gut. So it's on a spectrum. Okay, some are worse than others, definitely. But the way you can get tested is you can do a gut permeability test. So your doctor can test this. This is a widely used test, and you're essentially drinking a solution that cannot be absorbed through your gut. And so you're drinking this solution, and if it is absorbed through your gut lining, then we know, whoa, your gut is leaky. That's essentially the simplified version of that. Mm-hmm. And so, again, a solution that's not supposed to be permeable and go through the membranes of your gut does, then your gut is not doing its job. You're having some sort of leaky gut. And this is my own kind of statistic from just reading everything and seeing everything in our patients and looking at the American population, or I should say North America in general. I'd probably say like 60+% of the population is suffering with this, but it's getting diagnosed as other things. You'll hear fibromyalgia, you'll hear allergies,
chronic fatigue syndrome, all these autoimmune conditions as well. There's studies coming out and theories that hypothesize that almost all autoimmune disease is rooted in leaky gut. And so we're really triggering, activating, and overstimulating our immune system much of the time. So it's very ubiquitous throughout the body. And oftentimes we think leaky gut, stomach pain, but it can really manifest itself in various ways.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to share that I had used probiotics on and off throughout my life. And then when I was stuck with a parasite issue, I really needed something to help me get back to normal. And I had tried 4 other probiotics. And then when I found the Acea full spectrum probiotic, my whole life changed in 48 hours. And with a lot of my clients who are already on other probiotics or who have skin or mental health issues, they've had a lot of great success using this. Clinical studies support the use of probiotics with a wide range of benefits, and it really comes down to that cellular level inside the gut. Acea Biome is a robust, full-spectrum probiotic supplement. It contains 16 different strains, 3 types of prebiotics, as well as slippery elm, which has been used for thousands of years to address all kinds of intestinal discomfort and healthy digestion. This biome complex creates a healthy environment in the gut to promote the efficiency and assimilation of Biome's probiotic strains. If you want to know if that's good for you, you should email us at info@planttrainers.com or click the Biome link in the show notes, and we are getting back to the show. So what's causing this? Sorry, I'm not letting Adam get a word in today.
So what's causing this?
And that can be the tricky thing, right? Is because there's so many factors. So again, we kind of call it as we see this weed kind of growing, and not to hate on weeds, but we just see this odd plant that shouldn't be growing where it is, and we go, what's the root system? What's the root cause of this? Where so many want to just treat the branches, right? We're all trying to cut the branches off of this tree and go, okay, there, we're done. But then next season it grows back. So we want to say, what's the root of this? And many amazing doctors are doing this now. They're saying, what's at the root of this? Let's change up this game plan here and get to the root, like the amazing Dr. Sadeghi. And a lot of times it's all these little micro roots, right? There's so many roots. It's not like just one big root, like a carrot, right? And so what are some of those roots? Definitely environmental toxicities. So air pollution, water pollution, and pollution in our food. And and I just want to mention this, and Dahlia can mention some of the other ones, and we won't dive too deep into the environment, but one thing to consider is if you live in an urban area, if you're living in a big city, whether it's downtown LA, or I know Toronto's a pretty big city. And so, you're breathing in all these pollution particles, and that goes into your nose, it goes into your mucosa, and what do? You swallow it, right? It becomes part of your mucosal liquid and you swallow it. And where does that go? It goes right into your gut. So you are even taking these air pollution particles and swallowing them into your gut, because your body has adapted a design to digest and break down even pollution particles in your gut. But what happens when it's just overwhelmed? There's 80,000 approved chemicals that have not been tested that we are using in this world. So what happens when those 80,000 go into your gut? well, we're kind of seeing it. We're the guinea pigs. We're the experiment right now. And chronic disease is definitely on the rise.
And so combine that with inflammatory foods, right? We tend to see some top inflammatory foods. A lot of them happen to be animal derived. So we see dairy, number one. I would say that's probably the most inflammatory food that one can be consuming. And then we see things like eggs oftentimes, whether that's found out through an elimination diet for a patient, or we run food sensitivity testing and they've come off the charts for eggs. Sugar is a really inflammatory food. You have things like
refined sugar.
Yeah, refined sugar, refined grains, alcohol. So when you're having these highly inflammatory foods in your system, of course, that will trigger that. Then you see other things. You have genetic predisposition, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe mom was having some issues, or maybe grandma smoked. And as we know, when grandma was born, she had mom inside of her, mm-hmm. and mom had all her eggs. So we at one point were an egg inside of grandma, right? And so what grandma was exposed to, we were kind of exposed to as well. So it can have these transgenerational effects. We oftentimes see that stress and emotional trauma can trigger some of these gut issues for a lot of people. And then, we see various things that can factor.
We can keep listing and listing, but to put it a little more simply, there's 3 areas of stress, right? Chemical, physical, emotional. Those are the 3 big categories, right? So all of what we said fall into one of those categories. So it's chemical, physical, emotional, stress, or trauma. However way that comes in is going to affect the gut microbiome.
So I feel like it's one of those things where we need to control what we can control. And I feel like the environment is very challenging for most people to control. They're not going to walk around with masks on everywhere they go to prevent the pollution coming in. But there are certain elements of the environment we probably could control, especially within our own homes. But more likely people would be able to control the food they consume, mm-hmm. and even how they deal and manage with the emotional stress of life or stress that they go through.
Really?
Or the chemicals you absorb through your soaps and detergents and all of that.
Yeah, they can control that, I guess, too, right?
Mm-hmm. So we have more power than we would realize.
Yeah, and I guess people don't realize that.
Right. Mm-hmm. And well, here's the beautiful thing. We break it down into 3 layers as well. You have the inner layer of health, the direct outer layer of health, and the greater environment, right? So just 3 layers. And the beautiful thing is, just like that root analogy, it's all connected. Mm-hmm. So even if you start with food, you are affecting other layers. I tell my patients it's like throwing a rock into a lake, and it's a ripple effect. So whether you know it or not, you're affecting those other layers. That is one of the major reasons we went plant-based, is because we go, wow, our environmental impact is just greatly decreased. We're actually helping air pollution, and we're helping to decrease water pollution and so on and so forth. So definitely food is a great place to start. And we even do it more micro, is start with one food or one meal a day. And because it is very overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And for those of you watching or listening, if you're overwhelmed by this, that's a great reaction. It's a very natural reaction. And this is something we've been doing for several years, and we've studied thousands of hours. And so we first started on just one little section of this, and it grew from there. So that's exactly what you all should do.
And that's where you expand your sphere of influence as well. And like we mentioned earlier in the episode, use your social platform, or use, whatever platform mm-hmm. you have, communicate with your family, your community, your friends, and then you'll start to slowly impact your greater environment. And so mm-hmm. you'll slowly, inadvertently, even at times, start cleaning up those outer environmental exposures, because when others around you are well informed, that is only going to improve your health as well as theirs.
Totally.
So I want to get a little bit more into how to clean up some of those things a little bit later on. But before I do, I want to talk a little bit about SIBO, because I think that it's going to be the same answer no matter what. So we may as well wait for it and chunk it together. But leaky gut is something that I think, although a lot of people didn't understand before, had heard about. What is SIBO?
Yes, and that can often go hand in hand with that leaky gut, right? So we kind of, with that, often ask what came first, that chicken or the egg, with SIBO or leaky gut. And as I mentioned, it really goes back to what I was saying, that your gut is this one big long tube. And in that tube, that substrate is supposed to flow one way, right? So food is only supposed to go in one direction. All of that happens in a unidirectional way, kind of like a river, right? So a river, you don't see it flowing back as well as forward. It's all going in one one direction. And when you have backflow, then you have symptoms. So if you have backflow, in your upper esophagus, that's called reflux, right? And you're going to have heartburn because stomach acid's coming back up. So these doors that I was saying that separate these compartments, they're only supposed to open one way. And so different things can cause backup or slow down in your system. So there are so many different causes of SIBO. They can be as simple as aging. Aging kind of tends to slow things down. They can be more complex, such as hormones. So we see oftentimes hypothyroidism, even sometimes it's not detected, it's subclinical, that causes a slowdown, right? Your metabolism is slowing down and the food, that substrate, is not moving quickly through, and it's kind of being allowed to over ferment, and things are happening in a really slow way. We also see uncontrolled diabetes can have an impact on that, because we oftentimes think of diabetes as a disease that affects your small nerves, right? So it affects your vascular system. And if we think diabetes can affect these peripheral nerves in your hands, your feet, we often hear diabetics lose sensation or have tingling or neuropathy in the hands and feet.
And neuropathy is basically just nerve death.
Nerve death, yeah. So guess where one of your most concentrated bundles of nerves is? In your gut. So you're also going to have nerve death in the gut that slows things down from moving. We see this in those who have past history of narcotic drug use, whether that's prescription or not. And so we're seeing this in many, many different populations, those with eating disorder. So many people are at risk for SIBO. Yeah. And so when you are having any slowdown, then sometimes the doors start malfunctioning. And as I mentioned, you have this door between your small intestine where you're absorbing things and there's more food particles available there, and then your large intestine where things are widely already absorbed, digested. Mm-hmm. And so when that door malfunctions between the small and large intestine, that very concentrated colonic or large intestinal bacteria backflows. And as I said, 70% of the bacteria in our gut microbiome is in the colon. Mm-hmm. So you have this abundance of bacteria that now is like, ooh, food, right? And so in the colon, that bacteria's job is to ferment. And the byproduct of fermentation is gas. And so we'll get into the symptoms of SIBO, but basically this bacteria, it's not harmful bacteria. Oftentimes I think people think it's bad bacteria. It's not. It's perfectly harmless, natural bacteria.
Kill. No.
Yes. It belongs in your system, but it doesn't belong in the small intestine. So when it's come up, it's crept up there, it's starting to really quite literally compete with us for absorption of our own food, and it's starting to ferment. So we're starting to have symptoms like exaggerated bloating, and we'll talk about some more of the symptoms.
And you say, so SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. We also like to use the term SIMO, small intestinal microbial overgrowth, because we're just assuming it's bacteria, right? But we
sometimes say it's fungus for people.
Right. So it can be like yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, because microbial assumes now that it could be Candida, right? It could be the archaea, it could be all kinds of different microbes that are backflowing and causing these issues. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. You said overgrowth and everybody's going, ding, Candida. So where does that fit in? And is that a real thing? Because I think there's a big discrepancy between the medical community and the more holistic community as well.
Yeah, well, so the most common Candida that we find in the body is Candida albicans, and that is a natural Candida strain in the body. It does a lot of great things, and we liken this to an ecosystem. So, there are hyenas and jackals and badgers, and they can tear things up, and they're really mean, and people go, oh, I don't like those animals, but they're a vital part of the ecosystem. So when we say, oh, no, Candida, and here's this Candida cleanse and kill Candida, it's like you're trying to wipe out all the coyotes or wipe out all the hyenas just because you don't like them, but not understanding what that does to the ecosystem. And it's really just this kind of dysbiosis, right? But it's also this imbalance in the ecosystem that may cause jackals to overpopulate or coyotes to overpopulate. That doesn't mean we should kill all of them. And so Candida, we're actually theorizing, and this is something Dr. Sadeghi and I love to talk about, is because what we see in the soil is when you destroy soil, one of the first things you start to see is fungi networks. So you start to see this fungi growing, and we almost like to think the fungi is coming back to repair build networks for other microbes. And we're seeing that happen almost in the gut, very similar to how it happens in the soil. So we may get mad at first. It doesn't feel good as this fungi overgrows, but we kind of see it being a placeholder for healing if you allow it to heal. However, what most people do is go, oh my gosh, now I have fungal overgrowth. Now let me take some antifungal medications and take this other thing. And you're not facilitating the healing. You're actually just going back to war again and causing more and more damage. So yeah, it can be very frustrating.
James, you're such a fungi.
Oh gosh. So how do they know? How do people know if they have SIBO? Are they just going to be vomiting often, diarrhea often? Just like, what are the symptoms really that they display? And then how do they deal with it?
Yeah. So one of the most common symptoms that we hear our patients report to us is I wake up with a flat stomach, and the second I start eating or even drinking, sometimes it's water that triggers this, I become more and more bloated. And by the end of the day, I look and feel pregnant. My pant size has changed. I'm extremely bloated and uncomfortable. And so that can tell us that, yes, there's something over fermenting in the small bowel, because if you're fermenting in the large intestine, there's an exit door, right? That gas can pass and it's not going to accumulate. But in the small bowel, it oftentimes will get trapped. And so they're really bloated, which then in turn can, for a lot of people, cause reflux as well, because you're having this bloating put this upward pressure on your lower esophagus, and that door then is opening. So you're having reflux as well. We start to see nutrient deficiencies. As I mentioned, that SIBO bacteria is quite literally competing with us for our food before we can absorb it. So we start to see deficiencies in things like iron, B12. We start to see many different types of deficiencies. And then we can see other symptoms. So patients, once they become deficient, they're having hair loss, they're having memory issues, brain fog. And if it is a severe imbalance, we do start seeing overgrowth of other things like fungi and Candida.
So, but essentially it was that first part. So that very first part is indicative of that, wow, I'm progressively getting bloated where I look 6 months pregnant. That is classic SIBO or SIMO, right? And one thing you can do is a breath test, although it's not always accurate, but you can do a breath test where then you take basically taking your breath, and we can measure these gases. So if you're having too much of, let's say, hydrogen, methane, or hydrogen sulfide, we go, okay, yeah, there's something going on. You have an overgrowth. There is this SIBO or SIMO going on.
And unfortunately, the testing process is not perfect. One, if your provider's ordering this test, a majority of the time you're doing it at home. Some providers do have a breathalyzer machine in their office where you blow in there and then they can help you detect that. But if you're doing it at home, there's a lot of room for error, right? You might accidentally get oxygen in the bag and then your sample's lost. Or you might have a false positive because maybe you didn't fast in the perfect window, or there's so many different factors. And James mentioned that we know of currently, there are 3 types of gases that can over accumulate, but there's only a test available for 2 of them. So you might have that third type, but because we can't test for it, someone might tell you, oh, no, you don't have SIBO, your test is negative. So it's not a perfect system. And so, you can also get an aspirate of that gas in the small bowel as well. So that is a very invasive procedure where a gastroenterologist would have to go in through upper endoscopy and really collect that sample, that aspirate of gastric secretion. But we can test for patients. Sometimes we don't do the test because the patient has such severe classic symptoms. So sometimes we say, let's go ahead and start treating you. Clearly, you're having some type of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. You're having some type of imbalance. Let's go ahead and just maybe start treating you, 1, with diet first, and 2, with nutraceuticals or pharmaceuticals if necessary.
I want to just differentiate, between the bloating that we're talking about as far as SIBO goes to someone who's not normally eating, let's say, black beans, and they all of a sudden start eating black beans and they feel they get bloated and gassy. There's a big difference between that kind of bloating and the one you're talking about, correct?
Very much so. With that type of bloating where, you're eating a high fiber meal or you're eating beans that you're not accustomed to eating, that's really going to onset when you eat that food. With SIBO, they're bloated all day, every day. So you like I said, for some people, water triggers the symptoms. Just having a sip of water in the morning, eating any type of food is going to cause those symptoms where it's all day long, it's cumulative, and it's exaggerated bloating. And we now are discovering sometimes patients will come into the office and Dr. Sadeghi does her exam and she's like, but you're not that bloated. And they're like, oh, I feel so extremely bloated. And so we're seeing that maybe this is generating that nerve inflammation, nerve damage, where people even feel more bloated than they actually appear because we're seeing that there's damage, there's inflammation in the outer GI.
Yeah.
I've just thought about times myself where I felt super bloated and I've taken a picture, like I've lifted up my shirt and taken a picture of myself and looked back at the picture and I'm like, oh, damn, I look pretty good. But I don't feel very good sometimes, right? So there's that disconnect sometimes.
Totally. And sometimes patients send us their pictures and they do look pregnant where we're like, oh, wow. They'll send us a morning picture and then they'll send us an evening picture and it looks like they're 6 months pregnant, but it's gas. They're pregnant with gas.
Yeah.
So then what do we do? What do we do that's not pharmaceutical? What do we do that's not completely invasive to start to get people on the right track to see if they can start to fix this on their own or if they do need more medical intervention from the right people who understand it?
Right. So one thing we did start was an online program for this. So because it's so multifactorial, there's so many little pieces, and by no means does this online program, replace your care team. You still have to work with a knowledgeable care team, but this online program breaks it down into phases. It gives you everything. We factor in the environmental factors. We factor in what you eat. We have a lot of mental health experts helping us with this, and we're talking about physical therapists who specialize in visceral manipulation. So we're trying to hit it from all these angles where you're not just popping a pill constantly and hoping it goes away. So that is yourgutconnection.com, and you could follow us on Instagram. We're going to also be posting these before and after pictures of people who look pregnant and then don't look pregnant anymore. So yeah, without having a baby, it's just a gas baby. But that's something we developed in the clinic over time is dealing with this, seeing these patients and coming up with the best practices and best ways that we've seen great success.
And our program's different. There are a lot of other SIBO programs available out there. Ours is the first ever that's plant-based, because for a lot of the programs available out there, including a low FODMAP diet. So FODMAP means fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. So it's really eliminating fermentable foods from the diet. Guess what? That's a lot of things that are really healthy for you. Apples and beans and a lot of different grains and these really great prebiotic foods that help heal that leaky gut. So we wanted to do it differently, where we're saying, no, that gives you short-term gain, but long-term, that's only digging you deeper in that hole. And then that's when patients come to us crying in our office saying, I was low FODMAP for 5 years. Now I can only eat 6 different foods and I don't get symptoms on those, but every month it changes. Then I start reacting to one of those foods. So we wanted to create a reverse elimination diet where we are giving people a strategy to, okay, let's take it back. Let's get simple. And then we're going to build upon that in 6 different steps. When their gut is ready, we always say, when you feel 70% better, progress to the next phase. But we wanted to do it differently. And as I mentioned, if they do have a severe overgrowth, then we might employ the use of some nutraceuticals that Johns Hopkins University did a study on that showed that they were just as effective as the pharmaceuticals, because there are antibiotics out there that are effective for SIBO, but they're quite pricey. So we will sometimes employ some of those nutraceuticals, or we'll teach patients, okay, maybe you're having slowdown or weakening of your gastrointestinal tract. Let's teach you how to practice exercises that strengthen that, whether that's loud singing, deep breathing, or different things. And we wanted to really hit it from different angles.
And again, nutraceuticals meaning we use like a herbal antibiotic. And so, if you're the type of person that's like, man, I'm constantly bloated, I'm gassy, I don't know what to do. I went on low FODMAP. I tried this diet. I tried this cleanse. I went on this water fast. And a lot of times we give the analogy that like you're this person getting another credit card, another credit card, another credit card. And you have a lot of these practitioners just saying, oh, well, when the bill comes, just rip it up. right? Just avoid your problem, right? So the low FODMAP approach is like, oh, you have this problem? Well, just avoid it by avoiding the foods that make you gassy. That is not getting to the root of the problem. That is avoiding the symptoms. That is spending, and not paying your bill and just ripping it up and go, la, 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 I don't see it. I don't want to know about it. For some of you, you've racked up a lot of debt. You're in maybe $30 or $50 or $100,000 of debt. We're going to have you face that. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be, a playtime like, yay, this is going to be great. But if you're really invested into it, you are going to pay off that debt. You're going to get out of the hole you dug. You're going to end your gas and your bloating long term and build a robust gut microbiome. That is something we really wanted to stress.
And, something we encourage every single patient who we work with, and this is an actionable step people can take, whether they're working with us or not. Figure out your why. Why did you get SIBO? What is the root cause? Because studies have shown that 40 to 67% of those treated with just the antibiotic, they do nothing else, no lifestyle, dietary changes, anything, they will relapse and they will again have that SIBO return because you're not treating that root cause. So if anything, figure out what is your root cause. Why did you get SIBO? What is happening in your body causing that slowdown?
Yes.
I think finding the root cause is really what we need to do for all of these chronic illnesses and diseases that we're facing. And the work that you guys are doing is making a huge difference. So we wanted to thank you for sharing that with us. And there's so much more that we could talk about. And we'd love to have you back on to have more conversations because we love what you're doing. And we think you can add more value to so many people. And we want to help you do that. Can you one more time just give us those links of where people could connect with you so that we have them and we'll put them in our show notes?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so for the online SIBO IBS program, yourgutconnection.com. We're on Instagram and Facebook if you want to connect with us there, see what we're posting.
At Your Gut Connection.
At Your Gut Connection, and it's just the way it's spelled. And for us, we're married to health. That's more of our personal day-to-day where we're posting recipes and nutrition and
tips for good gut for kids and adults. So that we are very active on Instagram, Facebook. We even have TikTok now. And you guys can go to our website.
We're trendy with TikTok. Ooh.
Gotta stay.
That's married to health. I'm marriedtohealth.com. And like we said, so right now we're with Dr. Angie Sadeghi in her practice. We're rebranding that. So look out for the Institute of Plant-Based Medicine, where we'll have plant-based dietetic support, plant-based gastroenterologist, plant-based family practice physician, and a plant-based rheumatologist, and much more coming. And more coming. So we're really excited.
So you guys can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, the Institute of Plant-Based Medicine.
Super cool. We will link to all of that in our show notes at planttrainers.com so our listeners can find all those links. Thank you both so very much for being here on the Plant Trainers podcast today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers podcast. We want to make sure that you subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platform.
We really appreciate the feedback we receive from you. Every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans, it really helps other people find us just like you did.
Thanks so much to our patrons. To become a patron, visit us at patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference in the quality of the show.
And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle is @PlantTrainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at planttrainers.com for awesome recipes, a list of our services, and of course, our latest podcast.
We encourage you to email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so that we can help you improve your quality of life through nutrition and fitness.
So we hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time and have a healthy day. Or is that too corny?
It's a little cheesy.